Hi, I'm Arthur. I collect Giants game used memorabilia. I became a Giants fan maybe 40 years ago when Darrell Evans moved in as our neighbor when I was growing up as a young boy in Pleasanton. And I would walk to the bus stop with his children who were also in my school. And I'd always carry a pack of Darrell Evans cards in my pocket just in case that he showed up and I could get them autographed. And on the few occasions when he did show up at the bus stop, I held my cards out in my pen, and I remember he would sign them to Arthur, best of luck, Darrell Evans. And from that moment on, I was a Giants fan for life. I suffered with the Giants throughout the early 80s and throughout the 90s when they weren't very good and occasionally made the playoffs, but and in fact made the World Series a couple of times, but never ascended that mountain to the point where they were World Series championships. It was a heartbreak every year. I was convinced that I would never see the Giants win a World Series in my lifetime, and sort of resigned myself to that fact until 2010, when the Giants finally broke the curse, so to speak, and won their first San Francisco franchise World Championship. And that washed away all the wounds of the past and was literally the happiest day of my sports fandom life. And as Giants fans, of course, we had the good fortune of then seeing the Giants win again in 2012 and 2014. I remember in each of those years I was tried to buy a souvenir from what was then called AT&T Park. I'd always buy a World Series hat or a World Series pullover shirt or something that commemorated the World Series wins. Little did I know that you could buy actual items that were used in World Series games. I had no idea back then. Right around 2017, years later, when I happened to come across the MLB auction site and realized that you could buy like jerseys and bats and balls that were actually used in the World Series games, I was just floored. Like, I was thinking to myself, shouldn't this stuff belong in a museum? How can fans just, buy this historically significant stuff? So I decided for the first time ever in 2017 to bid on an auction item in MLB auctions. And I'll show you the first piece of game used memorabilia that I ever purchased. It's this Madison Bumgarner jersey from 2014, and it's a batting practice jersey, so it wasn't actually worn during the actual games. But this jersey is an MLB authentication hologram, which authenticates it to games 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7 of the World Series, meaning that Bumgarner wore this jersey during batting practice before each of those World Series games. And I remember putting in a max bid. The bid got bid up to my max bid, and I was so nervous that I might not get it. And lo and behold, when the hammer fell, it was mine. I remember when it finally showed up in the mail, and I opened the box and I laid this out on the couch in front of me. I sat down cross-legged on the floor and just stared at it for literally 15 minutes, just in awe, thinking that Bumgarner wore this while he was getting ready to pitch one of the greatest World Series performances of all time. And just thinking about that and feeling this incredible connection to a World Series legend, it just forever changed me. It was like there was a chemical change in my brain. I'm sure a lot of addiction specialists probably will talk about this as the very first hit of anything that they become addicted to. You just get this probably rush of dopamine, and I felt that. Just my brain forever changed. It was like falling in love. But this was my first purchase, and this is the gateway drug that got me hooked. My very first purchase in 2017. Obviously not my last purchase. I'm a little ashamed to say I've gotten a lot more items since then. For instance, here's one of my favorites. This is also from Madison Bumgarner. This is the jersey that Bumgarner wore when he pitched the 2014 wild card game, the winner-take-all game against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And Bumgarner threw a shutout, shut the Pirates down 8-0. And this was one of several shutouts that Bumgarner has had in the postseason that has added to his postseason legend. Many people consider him to be one of the greatest postseason pitchers of all time, just one of the real money pitchers that comes through in a clutch. If you need to win a game, you start Bumgarner, and he will give you a good chance of winning in the postseason. This was one of, I believe, 3 postseason shutouts that he threw, complete game shutout. Really one of the games that made him the postseason legend that he is. The great thing about this jersey, even though it's authenticated to the wildcard game, I've also looked at old photos of other games to see if I could match some of the thread pools and knots and wrinkles that are in this jersey to see if it matched any other games. And lo and behold, it also matches to a game where he hit a home run in September. Bumgarner was also, when he was with the Giants, considered one of the best hitting pitchers in Giants history, and perhaps the best hitting pitcher in the game while he was playing with the Giants at his peak. And he wore this jersey while he hit a home run in 2014 in September. I photo matched it to 2 other games in September, including a win. There was another game where he threw at Yasiel Puig, and then Puig got angry and charged the mound, and it caused both benches to empty. So I really feel like this jersey just encapsulates all the really unique aspects of Bumgarner when he was playing with the Giants. A pitcher who can hit home runs, a pitcher who obviously pitches the most important games in the postseason and throws shutouts, a pitcher who's so fierce and competitive on the mound. He gets into brawls with Yasiel Puig. That's probably his most famous ongoing on-field conflict. I also photo matched this jersey to a photo of Bumgarner drinking 4 beers at once following the wild card win. So that also was one of the seminal characteristics of Bumgarner that made him so unique. Is during the postseason he would drink 4 beers at one time after the wild card win. After the NLCS win, he drank 5 beers at one time, and I think after the World Series celebrations he drank 6 beers at once. At any rate, this was the jersey he wore during one of those episodes. Really, perhaps my favorite Bumgarner jersey. Has the postseason patch. Really a nice jersey. My favorite items to collect have been Bumgarner postseason items. I have a few more. This one is a 2010 Giants batting helmet that Bumgarner wore pretty much throughout the season. I photo matched this to him wearing it early in the season and all the way through to the postseason. This was his rookie year, 2010. It was also, of course, the year that the Giants won their first World Series of the San Francisco era. And the cool thing about this, when you get a rookie item, especially one that was worn for the whole season, there are a number of milestones that it can be matched to. So I've matched it to his second career hit. I don't know what helmet he was wearing for his first career hit. He may have saved it. He's very sentimental about his game-used items, apparently, especially his bats. He tends to keep the ones that are important. But his second career hit, which resulted in his first career RBI, he also wore it for his first major league win first career Major League win, and he also wore it in the postseason during the NLDS, in which he got his first career postseason win as well. Unfortunately, he didn't have any at-bats during the World Series in 2010, so he pitched in Game 4 of the 2010 World Series in Texas, so there was a DH at that time. Otherwise, he would have won this in the World Series too, but nonetheless, really cool rookie item with a bunch of rookie milestones from Bumgarner. I have a couple more postseason Bumgarner items. This is a bat that Bumgarner used in the 2014 NLCS Game 1 versus St. Louis, and he signed the bat and signed it 2014 NLCS Game 1. This bat was absolutely shattered. He used it for a ground out, I believe, in the 7th inning. The bat just shattered into 2 pieces, and part of the barrel of the bat wound up in the infield grass. And the interesting thing about this bat is that it wasn't manufactured or issued to Bumgarner. It was issued to Mike Morse, and it's got Mike Morse usage characteristics. For instance, all this pine tar around the label and pine tar at the knob and handle are both classic Michael Morse characteristics. So Michael Morse prepped this bat, and then Bumgarner used it. It's well known that in 2014, Michael Morse used a huge bat. This bat is 34.5 ounces and 33 inches long, which is a large bat a large heavy bat by the modern era standards. And Mike Morse was a big guy, and he actually introduced these big bats to Bumgarner, who obviously tried out his bats throughout the 2014 season and even into the 2014 postseason. Bumgarner really liked this model of bat, and he ended up adopting it for himself. And from 2015 onward, Bumgarner swung a Marucci with the same characteristics, the same length and weight characteristics as this Mike Morse bat. So, and plus, this time period when he switched over to this bat corresponded to when Bumgarner's home run total started going way up. In 2015, after he started using this bat full time, he hit something like 5 home runs or 4 home runs, which is phenomenal for a pitcher. So this is just part of that story of Bumgarner using Mike Morse's bats and sort of falling in love with the Mike Morse model and using that for the rest of his career. And suddenly his hitting takes off. I'm sure it's not the only reason his hitting takes off, because he worked really hard at his hitting and was really dedicated to becoming better at hitting it. And I'm sure that has a lot more to do with it. But nevertheless, this is part of the story, and this was used in the NLCS, for which he was named NLCS MVP for his pitching performance. A few more items here. This is a 2010 game-used ball that was thrown by Madison Bumgarner in Game 2 of the 2010 World Series. It was authenticated to an Elvis Andrus foul ball off of Bumgarner, but I went back and looked at the video, and you can clearly tell from the video that in the prior at-bat before the foul, it was also used for a strikeout. So this is actually, in all likelihood, a Bumgarner strikeout ball. It was pitched for a strikeout and then thrown around the infield, and then the next pitch it was thrown to Andrews, who fouled it off, and then it was taken out of play and authenticated. But kind of a cool thing, this is from Bumgarner's first ever World Series start. He was only 20 years old. I'm sure no one expected that he would pitch 7 shutout innings in his very first World Series start and get the win. But that was the very beginning of his World Series legend, which this ball is a part of that history. And then on the other side of his World Series legend, I have this ball from 2014 World Series, which was pitched to Madison Bumgarner, which is this ball is authenticated to him fouling this pitch off during Game 5 of the 2014 World Series. which was the only game that was played at AT&T Park and in which Madison Bumgarner swung the bat. So kind of nice bookends. I have a 2010 World Series ball pitched by Madison Bumgarner, his very first World Series start, and then 2014 ball hit by Bumgarner for a foul ball, his last World Series start as a Giant, in which he pitched a shutout, a complete game shutout. Speaking of that complete game shutout in Game 5, I also have this World Series lineup card, which hung in the Kansas City Royals dugout from World Series Game 5. Again, that was the game that Bumgarner pitched his complete game shutout. The Giants won 5-0. The cool thing about this card is you can see Bumgarner's name in the 9th slot as the 9th hitter and also the pitcher. And ordinarily, just like what happened with James Shields here, the players' names are crossed out when they're replaced by a relief pitcher or by a pinch hitter. James Shields' name was crossed out when he was taken out of the game. Bumgarner was never taken out of this game. It was a complete game shutout, so there's no line through his spot in the 9th batting order here. So I thought that was kind of cool. And in fact, in the entire decade of the 2010s, there are only 2 pitchers that pitched complete game shutouts. The other was Johnny Cueto in 2015. And Madison Bumgarner, of course, Game 5 in 2014, pitched a shutout. So one of only 2 World Series complete game shutouts during the entire decade. And probably something now that so much attention is being placed on pitchers' pitch counts and bringing in relief pitchers and not letting pitchers go through the batting order more than 2 or 3 times. I'm not sure we'll ever see another World Series complete game shutout. So really, maybe one of the last of the modern era. Speaking of lineup cards, I also have this postseason World Series Game 1 lineup card, also hung in the dugout, in the Kansas City Royals dugout. Here I think Bumgarner only pitched 7 innings, kind of an off night for him. 7 innings and 1 run, still got the win, but clearly he was taken out of the game this time. I think he was replaced by Javier Lopez in the 8th inning. So I have both of the lineup cards, the dugout lineup cards that were used in the game in both of Bumgarner's 2014 World Series starts. And one last Bumgarner postseason World Series associated item is this World Series base. This base was used in Game 1, Bumgarner's start, and was third base used during innings 7 through 9. And Bumgarner pitched the bottom of the 7th inning, and the historical significance of this base is that the only run that Bumgarner gave up ever in the World Series as a Giant, for all 3 years that he pitched, was in Game 1 when he gave up a home run to Salvador Perez. And that was in the 7th inning when this base was on the ground. So Salvi Perez stepped on this base when he was rounding the bases, scoring the only run ever allowed by Bumgarner in 5 World Series games. So at any rate, those are some of the Bumgarner postseason and World Series items that I own, and really, for me, it's just been a pleasure acquiring these items and hunting for these items. Really pieces of World Series history, of Giants history. Bumgarner is a postseason legend, and I think his legend will only grow as time goes on, especially among Giants fans.